Hi, and welcome to Blank to Beautiful, a 5-day watercolor challenge. If you've ever felt your paintings look blotchy or the paint explodes on your paper, this lesson is for you. In today's lesson, we are going to look at the foundational skills of watercolor. This challenge is especially for beginners, hence, I'm not leaving any stone unturned for you. Before we even paint skies, oceans, and lakes, we will first understand how the water moves. And we will learn today all the basic foundational skills that actually help in 90% of your watercolor paintings. So we will go over wet on dry flat wash, we will do wet on wet flat wash, we will learn gradient washes, we will learn dry brushing technique, and we'll talk about backruns and blooms. Once you understand how watercolor works, everything becomes much easier. Your paintings become intentional and your strokes become confident. So let's get started. Here I painted a flat
Welcome to
wash,
day
wet on
1.
dry, but
The
I
first
forgot
technique,
recording it. So I'm
wet on
redoing
dry.
that.
This
So I
simply
mix the
means you're
pigment.
applying
This
wet
is again
paint onto a
cobalt
dry
blue,
paper. My
and
paper is
I'm keeping
completely
the
dry. My
consistency
brush
of
is loaded
water
with paint,
really
not dripping,
muted.
just
It
nicely
is kind of
loaded, and I
light
place it directly
consistency.
on the paper. Notice what happens.
Then I'm
The paint
going
stays
on
where
the
you put it.
paper.
The edges are sharper. The
I'm
movement
not
is
mixing
controlled.
any
Wet on
water
dry
any
is
further.
great for
I'm just
details,
going in
defined edges, foreground elements, mountains, boats,
to grab the
any shape
paint.
you want
And
it
I'm
to
not
stay
letting my brush
crisp.
dry up
Now here's the
completely
key. Control
so
your
that
brush moisture. If
there
your
are no
brush is too
backruns.
wet, the paint
We'll
will
talk
spread
about
more than
backruns
you
in a
want,
bit.
and if it's too dry,
So this
it
is
will
my
feel scratchy.
flat wash
That's wet on dry.
with wet
Now,
on
wet
dry.
on wet
Now
means
we will on
applying
wet.
wet paint onto wet
I'm going
paper.
to wet
First,
this
I'll take
section.
clean water and evenly wet the section of the paper. Make sure there are no puddles, just a soft sheen. You should see
You
a
can
gentle
tilt your paper
shine
if
when
you
you tilt the
like.
paper.
Want it to be
Now, I load my brush with pigment
flat
and
wash.
touch into the
If
wet
you tilt
area.
it, you get the
Just see
gradient wash
that
very
the
easily.
paint spreads softly. The edges bloom out naturally. This is perfect when you're looking for soft skies or soft ocean movement, backgrounds, mist, and a little bit of atmosphere. But there's one important part, timing. If the paper is too wet, your paint will explode. If it's too dry, you will get a hard edge.
Not adding any more
You
water
want that
or
in between
anything,
stage
and
where it's
it's just
glossy, not puddly.
covering the paper
Watercolor is all
with the
about
pigment.
watching the
Simple as
shine.
that.
If you see there are
If you
streaky
find it
lines when you're
streaky or
doing wet
has
on
lines, you
wet,
can just
just
tilt
tilt
it a
the
bit
paper
so
so
that
that
the
the
water
water
flows
flows
down
down
and
and
there are
this
no more
eliminates those
those
straight
lines.
streaky lines.
So
Now
that's
let's
wet on wet.
create
That
a
was wet on
gradient
dry.
smooth
Now I'm going to,
wash. This is
what I'm
essential for
doing is
skies
I'm
and
going to
water
wet the
depth.
paper.
I've started by wetting my paper and now I am going to mix the pigment while the
I'm going to
paper
mix
soaks
my
in the
pigment.
water. I'm using cobalt blue again here. Now,
And I'm
once
going to
my
tilt my
brush is
paper
fully
now.
loaded with the pigment, I'm going to start with the loaded brush on the
Make
top
sure
with the
there are no puddles
horizontal
forming.
stroke and
And
then
then I'm
move
going to
downwards.
go in with my pigment.
You can see the paint flow through the
You can see
paper.
it's flowing down.
I have not loaded the paint again. I'm just using the wetness of the paper to dilute my paint.
That will give you the
And the
gradient
tilt
wash.
that I
Now if
have
you're not
given
happy with
allows
it,
the
you want
paint
it
to flow
darker,
down
lighter, you can go
easily.
in with a second layer.
While my paper is
While
wet,
it's
if
still
I
wet,
want to
if it
deepen the
is dried
colors, I
up,
can
you have to
go
wait
back
for the
in from the
entire
top
paper
to
to
bottom
dry
again.
before you go back in.
Now, if you see there is a pool of water
If there
bead
is a
forming
water
on the
pooling
bottom,
on the
just
bottom
take a
of your
damp
paper, you
brush
can just
and pick
run
up
your
that bead
brush,
of water
a damp
and
brush,
dab it to your paper
under
towel.
your
You
pad
can do that
to
multiple
pick up
times
that
as
excess
long
water.
as you don't have that bead forming because the back run of the bead will
And
ruin the
like you can
gradient.
see, it is
Now,
too
if you
dark at the
think your wash
bottom. I
doesn't
don't want
have
it, so
enough
I'm going with a
gradient, you can
damp
also
brush and I'm
lift the
lifting off the
paint
paint.
with the damp brush. You can see here I am lifting it ever so slowly. You can continue as long as you're not satisfied. I'm going to stop midway because I think I have the kind of gradients that I want. I have it
because it's tilted.
I'm keeping the tilt going on because I want that wash to look smooth and have no streaky lines or a clear divide. Now once the paper is dried, you can see the wet on dry and the wet on wet look absolutely same. There is no difference.
It's just the technique, whichever you
So
like.
it's just about which technique you would prefer over the other. The gradient wash has also turned out well with the darkest stroke on the top. You can see that.
And then this
There
is
are a few
light,
streaks
and
that
then
I
there is a
see.
little
I
bit
think
of
that's
streaks
because I used the heat gun in the wrong
water
way.
flowing down because
I held the heat
dried
gun
it
too
with the
close
heat
to
gun,
it.
which is why
But I like the way it has dried up. Now let's talk about the annoying back runs. Here I'm going to show you what causes the back runs, and we will also learn how to avoid those blooms and back runs when we don't want it to impact our painting.
I'm going to wet my
I'm not
paper.
saying they are not good. I'm just saying that if you don't want them, you should also know how to get rid of them.
Right? Now, if I am going to go in and paint with this consistency,
Now there is a certain consistency of this paint and the water on the paper.
and then go back in with a little more water. I'm adding more water here, and now go in with, you see, there is puddles forming, and there is no way for the water to go anywhere. So it is going back. So I'll show you that again with a different color. So you have this consistency of paint here. Now let me just do this. You have this consistency of paint here. Now if I add more water to my brush and same consistency, same paint, if I'm picking up here and adding it here, it's running back. You can see it's going to run back. This is drier. I don't know if you can make out. You can see this portion is dry and this was wetter, so it is kind of going to have like a stark line here. It's like I'm dropping water here. You see this? This is why there is background, because the consistency of paint or pigment on the paper is different from the consistency of pigment or paint that I'm dropping now, which is why there will be backgrounds and blooms. You see? However, if I drop the same pigment that I had earlier, it won't run. It won't impact because it will blend. However, you can get rid of it by running your brush across the paper when it's still wet and get rid of it. Don't want it, that is, if you're looking for that kind of texture on your painting, then it's great, but if not, then you'll end up ruining your painting without your knowledge that this small thing can change everything for you. Now let's do the last thing, that's dry on dry. I'm going to take a very creamy consistency. This is right out of the tube paint. I'm going to mix it here. I have a damp brush. I don't have water in the brush. You can see here it's not transferring, and then I run it on the paper. This texture is called dry brushing, and this is my favorite texture when I'm painting glistening or glowing water. So this is your day one exercise to create a wet on wet wash, a wet on dry wash, a gradient wash, dry brush stroke, and try to create a background
and how to get rid of it. So if you want to post it's great. You want to post that stages of background and how you got rid of it, that would be lovely. But if not, then just practice it so that you understand the rhythm of water. It'll help you in tomorrow's exercise, which we do on clouds. I always get a question about tape peel, and the tape peels off your paper and ruins the artwork. This is what I do so that there are never any accidents with the tape peel. I use the heat gun to warm up the tape, and that warming up melts down the adhesive on the tape. So when you're pulling it, it would not tear your paper or have any accidents with the tape peel. Watercolor isn't about
So when
fighting the
you
water.
warm up
It's
the
about
tape, it
understanding how wet is the paper, how wet is the
warms up the
brush,
adhesive
what
that's on
stage
the
is the
tape
surface
and then
in.
allows it to
Once you
melt
start
and
observing
peel
those
off
little
easily,
things, your
and there's no
confidence will
paper
grow.
tear. Watercolor isn't about fighting with water. It is about understanding how wet is the paper, how wet is the brush, understanding the level of dampness on your paper. And watercolor isn't about fighting water. It is about understanding how wet is the paper, how wet is the brush, what is the stage of surface in. Is it damp? Is it wet? Is it dripping? What stage is the surface in? Once you start observing these three things, watercolor starts demystifying itself to you. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I hope you will practice these exercises today. Please don't forget to share it in our Facebook group. And once again, once you master these skills, painting watercolor oceans and lakes becomes much easier. I'll see you in tomorrow's lesson.